As you may or may not know, I am an original series Trekkie. For me, Star Trek has been and always will be Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. And no, not those chuckleheads. But for the past few months, I've been plowing through Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I gotta say, the Sisko and pals are certainly making a valiant stand in the battle for my nerd love. I adore absolutely everything about this show. Its multifaceted characters, its premise, its Ferengi, and especially its complete subversion of everything Trek ever stood for, with Section 31, the whole issue with the Maquis, and Starfleet trying to take over Earth through fear and treachery. And the more I watch it, the better it gets. Season 6 has been one gem after another, what with In the Pale Moonlight, where Sisko sells out his principles to get the Romulans on the side of the Federation in the Dominion War, the Magnificent Ferengi, the absolute funniest Ferengi piece I've ever seen, and with Iggy Pop to boot. And not to mention that whole 6-episode mini-arc that began the season, which split the cast up, tore a rift through Odo and Kira, and ended with the death of... Okay, I won't spoil that one. But you know, this is episodic television. Not every episode can be a winner, but... The last thing I expected to see after a Paw-Wraith-possessed Jake Sisko throws down with a Prophet-possessed Kira is... Valiant. Jeez, what an absolute kick in the balls! In fact, I'm tempted to say I'd rather spend 45 minutes being kicked in the balls than have to watch this episode again. But I'm gonna go ahead and not say that. So the episode begins in Quarks. His replicator is broken, so he's swamped with customers, so Jadzia has to come in to fix it. And then Odo makes fun of Quark for crushing over her, and this scene is entirely pointless, really. Something that Deep Space Nine does a lot is focus on just a couple of characters, but then they feel compelled to shove in a token scene with all the rest of the cast. Unless we're talking about Jake, who they more often than not just ignore. Now this scene is usually at the end, and that's no exception for this episode. That's right, they bookend the episode with 2 throw-in-the-rest of the cast scenes. And that's because this episode is about Jake and Nog, and that's normally a good thing. As I just said, Jake gets the shaft far too often, and the last Jake and Nog-centered episode, In the Cards, was great and had been almost a year earlier. Nog is on a mission to Ferenginar and open up diplomatic relations with the Grand Nagus, and Jake is there to be a nosy reporter. This is one of those episodes that shows just how far Jake and Nog's relationship has come since the beginning of the series, and really how their roles have essentially reversed. When they were kids, Nog was always the one with the crazy schemes, getting Jake into trouble and generally being a menace. But now that Nog's gone through Starfleet and become an officer, it often seems like he has his head on straight, while Jake really hasn't grown up yet. And unfortunately, that has the effect of making Jake seem a little less sympathetic, like he does here, lying to Nog in an effort to get a scoop for his next article, and he really just feels like baggage. And unfortunately, that's not going to change in this episode. But as for Ferenginar and all that, it's totally irrelevant, as Jake and Nog are immediately surrounded by the Dominion. Rather than contacting the starbase they just left, Nog tries to signal Deep Space Nine for help. I'm not really sure why, it's really the starbase is in greater danger. Nog escapes to warp, but some of the ships follow suit. But then they're saved by a ship that looks like the Defiant, but it's not. It turns out that it's the Valiant, another Defiant-class ship that was believed to have been lost during the war. Instead, all of its officers were killed in battle, and the ship was taken over by the cadets. Specifically, the cadets are members of Red Squad, the elite group of students that Starfleet used in their plan to try to put Earth under martial law. In fact, look, it's the same douche that Sisko squeezed for information back in Season 4. While Jake is taken to have his wounds seen to, Nog gets to know the command crew, including Captain Tim Waters, a pill popper with plans for great honor and glory, who, by the way, immediately patronizes Jake for not following in his father's footsteps, and... the single most annoying person I've ever seen in Trekdom, his first officer, Commander Karen Ferris. I swear that every time she opens her mouth, I pray that someone just tosses her out an airlock. Every line she speaks is coated with an extra helping of smug, which first surfaces when it immediately becomes apparent that Nog knows more about warp cores than she does.
I thought we had that under control.
I did too, sir.
Have you recalibrated the lateral impulse control system?
No. What does that have to do with the injectors?
Well, the impulse system shares some of the same power relays used in the injector startup routine.
We'll try it.
But at least the captain appreciates Nog's talents and names him chief engineer and promotes him to lieutenant commander. Although whenever we see Nog after this, it looks like he's only been bumped up to lieutenant junior grade. Yeah, I guess it ran out of pips. Meanwhile, Jake is given the tour by Chief Dorian Collins, who I'll admit is the only character in this episode who seems even remotely human and doesn't possess any amount of smug. They make small talk in the mess hall until Jake's questions about her childhood make her a bit homesick and weepy. Meanwhile, Nog has reconfigured the failing warp drive, but does that satisfy little Miss Sand in her vagina?
You do realize you're violating about 50 safety regulations.
Bitch, please. You realize that Nog is the only actual officer on board this ship, right? You're lucky he doesn't take command right now and force you to scrub out the waste extraction tubes with your teeth. So shut up!
I don't know, Captain. This seems kind of risky to me.
Well, at least we can get back to Jake's story and avoid...
Mr. Sisko, sounds like you and the Chief had quite a conversation this afternoon. Home and family and the glories of dawn on the moon.
Yep, looks as though Jake is getting bitched out for having the audacity to engage someone in conversation.
Does that just about cover it?
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering how many scorpions it would take to just about cover your face.
What's going on, Mr. Sisko, in case you haven't noticed, is that we are in the middle of a war.
You know, I'm beginning to get the impression that this episode was written as a message for every single person who ever complained about Wesley Crusher on The Next Generation. And that message is, yes, it can get worse. It can get much, much worse. We can write characters who each have the annoyance factor of 10 Wesleys. Wesley, in his wettest of dreams, couldn't have fantasized such a spastic, ball-breaking, pissant harpy.
Won't they detect the probe?
So the Valiant finally comes into contact with its mission, a new Dominion ship that has to get data on.
Almost.
I don't remember anyone inviting you to the bridge.
Really, can any scene remain uncontaminated by the presence of Karen Ferris? I mean, technically yes, she has a point. Jake really has no business being on the bridge. But, if I may, just for a moment, allow me to present a compelling counter-argument. I hate you. And you really couldn't have come across as more of a snobby bitch if you'd been, well, every girl I ever talked to in high school. Anyway, it is high time Jake started taking after his father and learning to deal with his problems by punching the shit out of him.
I think we can do it.
So the Valiant completes its mission, and with the information they've gained, Captain Waters wants to go a step further and engage the ship in almost certainly suicidal combat.
Can I say something?
You are not a member of this crew.
I give up. I'm out of insults. There is literally not a single word that comes out of her mouth that doesn't make me want to bash in her skull with a rock. I mean, I'd rather they come across a ship crewed entirely by clones of Neelix. And don't misunderstand me here. It's not as if I am purposely picking clips to make her look bad. This is literally all that's happened in this episode. Nog does something, Karen bitches him out. Jake does something, Karen bitches him out. That is it. That is this entire episode in a nutshell. Granted, Jake could have chosen a slightly more diplomatic way to tell them they're probably all bones, so he's not getting off the hook either. Unfortunately, it doesn't do any good, so Jake decides to go bother Nog instead until they get into a fight. Now, I'm not sure if this episode has just made me that angry, but even the main characters are starting to piss me off.
You don't understand because you've never put on one of these uniforms.
Nog always idolized Red Squad when he was in the academy, so his head is too far up his own ass to listen to Jake. And Jake, while admittedly being treated unfairly, is still just coming across as whiny and completely devoid of tact. Not a single character has failed to get on my nerves.
All I care about is Jake Sisko and whether or not he's gonna be killed by a bunch of delusional fanatics looking for martyrdom. Get out.
Well, it seems that the captain keeps surveillance on Jake now and doesn't appreciate Jake telling Nog about his pill problem, and quickly goes Captain Bligh on his ass and has him thrown in the brig. Well, since I'm annoyed with both Jake and the crew, my anger really cancels itself out and I can't find myself feeling any emotion whatsoever. I just find myself looking forward to the inevitable carnage. Oh, and that pill popping problem the captain has that we've seen him do all episode? Yeah, that doesn't amount to anything in the slightest. Who cares? Let's just get this over with. So the captain gives a heroic speech. We get plenty of crossfades of our noble and annoying crew preparing for battle. They engage the enemy and shove a torpedo right up its ass.
Did we miss the target?
No, sir. It was a direct hit. It didn't work.
Excuse me for a moment. I have a feeling this is just about to get good. Maestro, a little mood music if you please. Continue. I've never been this happy to see so many people die! That's just good television.
Somebody let me out of here! Help! Jake!
So when my appetite for carnage has finally been whetted, Nog and the Chief grab Jake out of the brig and abandon ship. And the episode decides to throw me a bone by showing even the escape pods getting shot down. It's like getting a second Christmas! The episode then introduces its second shove in the rest of the main cast moment when the Defiant shows up just in the nick of time to rescue the only 3 survivors. Jake and Nog get off easy with their main character immunity, but the Chief suffers a fractured skull. And what better treatment for a fractured skull than by shattering all of her hopes and dreams?
He may have been a hero. He may even have been a great man. But in the end, he was a bad captain.
And so the episode ends, confirming Red Squad's oft-repeated motto, you can take away our lives, but you can never take away our astronomical levels of douchebaggery. It's hard to believe that this episode was written by Ron Moore, who wrote The First Duty, an episode about Starfleet cadets, an episode about Wesley, that was actually good. And remember that in that episode, the members of Nova Squadron were on trial because their showboating and maneuvers got one of their own killed, and they still came across as more likable than the ass clowns are introduced to in this episode. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad premise. I mean, a group of inexperienced cadets stuck behind enemy lines having to fend for themselves and do tasks they were never prepared for. But everyone involved is just so unlikable that it's impossible to get behind these people and hope they win. You just want them to die. I just want them to die. The only enjoyable moment comes when they all hilariously die. But even that falls kind of flat because, to be honest, that's just too good for them. If you ask me, the episode should have climaxed with the Jem'Hadar coming aboard their ship, disemboweling Ferris, and then playing hockey with their spleen. But I'm just a romantic like that. Anyway, see you next time!
When somebody loves you, it's no good unless he loves you all the way. Happy to be near you when you need someone to cheer you all the way.